of you love a good miracle story? Right? You just enjoy whenever God just kind of shows up and shows off right in somebody's life. Does something really powerful. Maybe you know somebody that with a great testimony. Maybe they're new and they type for the very first time, like on Sunday, and then on Monday they walk into work and they get this raise, right? And you're like celebrating with them. And then, or maybe, and that's a great thing. You celebrate with them, but then you're like, well, wait a minute. I've been tithing for years, and like I barely paying the bills, and I'm wondering, like, where's my miracle at? Where's my miracle at? Maybe you've got a friend who's been praying for a miraculous healing, and God shows up, and their parakeet, gets healed and doesn't have to die. But you're praying for your miracle. You're like, hey, where's my miracle? I've been praying for somebody that I know in my family who needs healing, or maybe you need healing, and you've been praying and it doesn't happen. It just doesn't come through. Maybe you've got a good friend who maybe she broke up with her not so good boyfriend, right? And then like 3 days later, God sends her this great young man, this great godly young man who looks like the son of Antonio Banderas, and he just like memorized a whole like New Testament, right? And they're just gonna then he proposes to her and they're gonna get married. It's just like amazing story. And you're like, well, I did the same thing, by faith. I kind of broke up with my not so good boyfriend, and that was like in 2015, and the only dates I've had since then are with Ben and Jerry. So I haven't seen my miracle. So what do you do when you find yourself kind of disappointed in God? Disappointed in God. What do you do when you feel like maybe God has let you down? I don't know what it would be, but maybe the baby that you've always wanted that never came. Maybe it's a miracle that by faith you believe God would do for you, but it just hasn't come. What do you do when you don't even want to say it because you have reverence for God, but you're wondering like, God, like, where are you? Where are you? Why aren't you showing up for me? Where's the miracle that I've been believing for? And then you might find yourself, kind of slightly, or maybe even more than slightly, disappointed with God, maybe even angry with God, or holding a grudge against God. And it's not that you don't want to trust God. You really, really do, but you just find yourself, it's really hard to trust Him right now because, God could do something, and yet He's not doing that something. And for some of you, if you're really honest, you may not want to say this or admit it, but there may be a kind of like a low-grade anger with God. And so what do you do when you realize you're holding a grudge against God? The first week of the message shares that we're talking about forgiving like small offenses, little things that kind of like are weighing us down and holding us back. And then last week we talked about forgiving the bigger betrayals. When somebody does something pretty big to you, was wronged you or wounded you. And next week we're going to be talking about forgiving ourselves. Maybe you recognize that God has already forgiven you, but you just carry this weight around, and you just can't, this guilt, this shame, you can't just shake off, and you just can't simply let it go. But today we're going to be actually talking about forgiving God. So what do you do when you realize that you're holding a grudge against God? And now, to be really technical, I want to say this is important. We're not ever really forgiving God because technically God never sins. God never does anything wrong, so He's technically never sinned. So to say that we forgive Him is kind of unfair. But maybe you're holding like a grudge. You feel like you've been wronged by God, like He let you down. So you kind of feel like you have to, I think you may need to reconcile with God because you have this anger, this grudge that you're holding against God. And you feel like God didn't do what He could do, and you're just feeling a little bit angry with Him, and you're just having trouble trusting Him again. So what do you do when you feel like you've been wronged by God? I want to look at a really powerful story in the Old Testament about a woman that probably she had to kind of reconcile some disappointments that she had with God. And first I'll tell you a little bit about her husband. I'll tell you this before I tell you the story. Her husband's name was Elkanah, and he actually had 2 wives. One of his wives is the one we're going to talk about. Her name is Hannah, and the other one her name was Peninnah. Now this guy has 2 wives, and I want you to understand that there was like these sister wives. They had this real serious rivalry going on between them, and I'll show you why. So first, I'll talk about the husband, like I said, Elkanah. Elkanah, whenever people would in the Old Testament, biblical times, when people would name their kids, it meant something. It had a meaning behind it. And Elkanah, in the Hebrew, it means God has created a son, or God will give you a son. So for this guy's whole life, every time they said, "Hi, Elkanah," they were actually saying God will give you a son, or God's going to give you a son, and you're going to have a son, God's going to give you a son. So for his whole life, that's what he heard every time people would say his name. So when he married Hannah, he just assumed that God would give him a son. But unfortunately, Hannah wasn't able to bear children. And so that's why most scholars believe that's probably why he probably got another wife, Hannah. So you can only imagine Hannah's internal dialogue. I can imagine this woman, she couldn't have a child, and so, especially in that culture, she just kind of felt like a tremendous failure. And perhaps she could maybe experience some shame, or she might have felt kind of useless as a woman, right? Or it could have been that it was really easy for her to say, "God, where are you?" I can imagine that she's saying, "You're the author of life. Why can't you give me a kid? Why can't you give me a son?" Each year, this family, Elkanah and his 2 wives, they would travel kind of like a little trip every year, and they would go to this place called Shiloh. They would go in there and offer worship and sacrifices to God. And the problem is that Peninnah, the wife who could have children, she would take every opportunity, especially on this trip that would go to throw some serious shade on her rivalry, on Hannah. And here's what Scripture says in 1 Samuel 1, 6-7. It says, "So Peninnah would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children." Verse 7 says, "Year after year it was the same." That's an incredible, painful verse. Year after year it was the same. Now for some of you, those words may haunt your soul. Maybe year after year, things have not changed. Things have never changed. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they would enter the tabernacle, and each time Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. Some of you know what that's like, to feel that brokenhearted, that you are reduced to tears and don't even want to eat, right? Or maybe you know someone who's had a breakdown, or that runs off and just falls apart and just doesn't want to eat, just doesn't have any appetite, is just completely just moved to tears. So I want you to try to get into the story and just kind of experience what's going on in this story. So we've got Hannah. She's a sweet girl, very godly girl. And then we've got the other one, Peninnah. This is one of the girl that your mama warned you about, right? She's kind of mean. She's vicious, cruel. She's mean. Stay away from girls like that, Mama said, right? And so you can only imagine Hannah's, mindset. She's probably asking, why in the world are you giving her kids and you don't even give me one son, right? Why can't you bless me? You're blessing her, and she's like mean, right? I can just imagine her in her mind thinking, I've been faithful. I save myself for marriage. I read my Bible every day. I come to the 10 o'clock service. I serve, in the nursery, once a month. I'm faithful. I'm a giver. I love you, God. I don't know why you don't give it to me. All these people are doing bad things. I see all around me, and they are getting blessed. And I don't understand why you're not blessing me in my life. And so she did perhaps the very same thing that some of you may do when you find yourself in this situation. She prayed. And she believed. And she waited. And then there was nothing. And year after year, she prayed, and she believed, and she waited. And maybe somebody here can relate to that you prayed, and you believed, and you waited. Maybe you prayed, and you believed for the salvation of somebody that you love, but you still, a year has gone by, year after year, and you haven't seen anything. Nothing's changed. Maybe you prayed for that job that you really need to be able to support your family, and maybe this job just seems so out of reach to you. And year after year you pray, you believe, and you wait. Maybe you're asking God to heal somebody that you love, and every day you pray, and He could, He has a power to heal them, and you believe that He can, and that He will. But you just haven't seen it, He hasn't done it yet, and you just wonder, why is He healing other people, but He hasn't healed that person that you're praying for? Maybe you're asking God, for different things. I don't know what it may be. It might be that trial that just never seems to go away. You're just praying for God to help you, and it just hasn't changed. maybe your marriage doesn't seem to get any better, and you're just praying and you're believing, and every year it just seems like it's the same and it hasn't changed. One day you wake up and you're just wondering, God, where are you? Where are you, God? I've trusted you. I prayed. I've trusted you. I believed, and I just don't see where you are. Why don't you? Are you even hearing my prayers? Are you hearing what I'm praying to you? Do you even care that I'm asking you that I really need this from you? Where are you? So you pray, you believe, and you wait. And another year goes by, and here we have Hannah. That's exactly how Hannah felt. She just was getting frustrated. She felt so, out of God's blessing. She's married to Elkanah, and who's, best I could tell, he's probably a good man, The problem is, he's a guy, right? And ladies, you understand, that you can't cast a guy out of a man. It's just part of who they are. And the problem is that with guys, they just kind of, sometimes they ask like dumb questions, right? And so they're just hardwired that way. And but guys, there are certain things that you shouldn't ask, and that you shouldn't ask. They're forbidden for you to ask. Let's say, they seem natural to you, they seem right, but God has sent me here today to save some of you from disaster. Okay, so gentlemen, if I can just give you some advice right now. Okay, I'm going to never ever, the first thing is never ever when you come home, you come in, the first thing don't ever ask, what did you do all day? Don't ever ask that. Don't ever ask that. No.
Amen.
Don't ever walk up to your wife and ask, did you really need to do that to your hair? Just don't do it. Okay, don't ever do that. And whatever you do, gentlemen, whatever you do, listen to me, please. Whatever you do, don't ever ask the question, are you PMSing? Don't ask that question, okay? Ask things that are safe, why are you so wonderful, and how did I ever get you? Those are good questions, right? So Elkanah was a guy. So one day he asked an incredibly guy question. So poor Hannah wants to have a child, and Elkanah wonders, why is she so upset? Why is she so upset? He's asked this question. He's like, why are you crying, Hannah? Elkanah would ask, why aren't you eating? Why be downhearted just because you can't have any children? You have me. Isn't that better than 10 sons? He's a guy. Yeah, that actually makes sense to him, ladies, but I can't explain why, but it did make sense to him to ask that question. And Hannah, she's doing everything that she possibly can to trust God. And yet, the one thing that she wants, God seems to be withholding from her. And then she's got this Penina running around with her little rugrats, right? And just kind of criticizing her and belittling her. And her husband, who's a good man, continues to put his foot in his mouth, right? So what do you do when you wake up and you find yourself disappointed because God didn't do what you know He can do? Now, I want to show you what Hannah did. And this is something that, on occasion you might even find very helpful to do. Now, chances are pretty good that, you won't hear of this often, in the church. You won't hear a lot of pastors, telling you to do this. And I won't recommend you doing it every day for the next 20 years. But every now and then, you may do this, what she did. And what she did was she unloaded on God. She just let her rip. She just didn't hold anything back. She went to God and she told God exactly how she felt. She took all the pain and all the hurt and all the disappointment and all the anguish she had, all the agony, and she just hurled it recklessly at God. She just let Him have it. This is what Scripture says. It says, once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli, the priest, was sitting in his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. From the depths of her heart, she cried out. Now, I don't know what she said, maybe God this isn't fair. Why didn't you give her a baby and not me a baby? Right? Maybe she could be thinking, well, God, I've done everything I could for you. Look at all, I sacrificed all the time for you. I believe in you. I'm faithful. I love you. I've trusted you. I've been here, for you. Why haven't you done this thing for me? And she just pours out her heart to God. Now, if you ever find yourself hurting or disappointed in God, let God know. Let him know. Pour out your heart to him. He's big enough to handle your hurt. David did it in the Old Testament. He's like, God, why aren't you stopping my enemies? Why did you let them taunt me? Jeremiah cried out to God. Even Jesus on the cross cried out to God, my God, why have you forsaken me? Even he cried out to God. Even he let him know. God loves you so much, and he understands when you're going through pain. I believe with all my heart that he welcomes your questions. He's big enough to handle each one of our doubts. In fact, with everything I have inside of me, I really believe that God would rather have you, yell at him in disappointment and pain than to walk away in hurt and doubt. I really believe that he'd rather have you just yell it out, whatever you have to do, but come to him. Because you know what? I'm going to tell you something. He already knows how you feel. He knows you're disappointed. He knows you're angry. He knows you have a grudge against him. He knows you feel like he let you down. He knows all this. He does. He really does. But when you come to him and you bring it to him and you're honest and raw and just, even if you're angry, if you yell and you can't handle it anymore and you just let it out, something happens inside of your heart. And God begins to heal that. And I've found in my own life that when I do that, when I just let it out and let him know how I feel, that I begin to see how silly. You hear yourself yelling, you hear yourself angry, you hear yourself demanding and saying, why me, or why not, or why haven't you, or why didn't you, or why them, and not, you know what I mean? And you hear yourself and you're like, what are you doing? This is God, and he's good, and he's there, and then you begin to worship him because you hear and you know that he, even though you're yelling and you're angry and you're letting him have it, that he's still holding you close and he doesn't let you go. Take your pain to God. Even if you find yourself disappointed, hurt or disillusioned with God, God is big enough to understand how you feel. Take it to him. Hannah unloaded on God, and she said, I don't understand. I just don't understand, God. Then in her prayer, she cries out to God, if you just give me a son, Lord, if you just give me a son, I'll give him back to you. He won't even be mine. I'll give him back to you. I'll dedicate every ounce of his life completely to you, Lord. And then there's an interesting dialogue between her and the priest. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about it, but at the end of the conversation, the priest essentially says to her, may God grant your request. That's all he says. There's no immediate change. There's no heaven opens up and God shines a light down on her. She walks away still with nothing tangible in her hand. She still has to deal with Penina, and her husband's still going to say dumb things, and she's still got no baby, and she's still got no real sign. And then what does she do? She does the very same thing that you might do when you find yourself disappointed in God. She continues by faith, even though she may not feel like it. She continues to try her best to hold on to God and to believe that he's still good. She hangs on. She still tries to trust. She sees nothing, but even though she sees nothing, she knows that doesn't mean that God isn't actually doing something, right? And with whatever little faith that she has, she continues to hold on and believing that God is still good. So she holds on and doesn't let go. And in 1 Samuel 1:19, here's what it says. The entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. I love the way that's phrased. The entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. They got up the next morning, still seeing nothing. And what did she do? She went to worship the Lord once more. Where are you, God? I know you can, God. Why haven't you, God? This isn't fair. This isn't fair. I talked a few weeks ago about my having a fibromyalgia, and this happened right when we began the church. We began the church plan, and it was in the year that we had just started. We just opened the church, as a matter of fact. We had just opened it up, and and a year later when I got diagnosed, I was very angry. I was, feeling like Hannah, thinking that's not fair. Why me? I'm serving you. I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing. You got the wrong house. Hello, thinking, what's going on here? Why is this happening to me? I don't understand, and I don't understand, and I didn't understand, and I still don't. I still don't understand why. But I told you that a couple weeks ago. It's like I've learned through this. I've learned to depend on God, like more deeply and more intense than I had before. And so I have to rely on God every single day. Like every day, I have to draw from Him, and I love that. I love my relationship with God now, even though it took that. And I'm still praying for healing. I'm still waiting for Him to do it, and I believe He can and He will in His timing. But He can still use my life through this. So I'm still waiting. But waiting time isn't wasted time with God. Waiting time is not wasted. So if you're praying for something, for a miracle, for something to happen, and you haven't seen God do it yet, and you're waiting, remember, God, the time you're waiting is not wasted with God. If you allow Him to continue working in your life, even though you're waiting for something to come that you haven't seen yet, God is faithful and God is good. And if you just hold on to Him, and just let Him still, work in your life while you're waiting, and you're going to see how, it's amazing that things, even when we're going through bad stuff, God can use that bad stuff, even our own mistakes, to just, grow us closer to Him. And that's really His goal. Penina learned the same thing. She learned that a wasted season isn't a waiting season, is not a wasted season. Just because you don't see God doing anything doesn't mean that He's not working. His Spirit is still working, He's still good, and He hears the cries of your heart. For those of you who are waiting now, it's not a wasted season, like I said. In Hannah's case, God hears the cries of her heart, and God gives her the desires of her heart. Now, that may happen in your life, or maybe it won't. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe you won't see what God, what you're asking God for, Maybe you won't. But no matter what the outcome is, the goodness of God is not based on what He does, but it's who He is. In Hannah's case, this is what happened. They returned home to Ramah, and then when Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, because she said, I asked the Lord for him. And she learned very clearly that God's delays are not necessarily God's denials.